The door to my house was slightly open when I got back. My hands still carried the scent of lilies from the funeral, from the final bouquet I had ever placed beside my mother. My name is Logan Pierce. I'm 38 years old and had been married for 7 years. No children, by choice, or at least that was what she always said. My mother passed away peacefully in her sleep, but before she left this world, she whispered something that stayed with me and refused to let go. Check the second drawer in my desk after the service. Alone. Inside that drawer, I discovered the deed to 2 farmland properties in North Carolina and a hidden will. But that wasn't all. There was another document as well. A mansion in Palm Beach, fully paid for, transferred entirely to me. Me alone. I drove home with my heart racing, eager to tell my wife and her family. Maybe this would finally be the thing that brought us together. Maybe for once we'd feel like a real family. But when I reached the front door and grabbed the doorknob, I stopped. I heard laughter. Her voice, her sister's, her father. "He's so easy to fool," she was saying. "His mom is gone now. He doesn't have anyone left." Then one of her sisters laughed and added, "Did he actually believe you when you promised you'd stay with him forever?" More laughter followed. I never opened the door. Instead, I stepped backward. And in that single moment, everything changed. I stood outside my own home feeling like an outsider. Inside, they kept laughing without a care in the world. Then my name came up again, this time with a level of disrespect I had never heard from her before. "Once he signs the refinance papers," her father said, "we won't have to keep carrying his broke ass anymore. Your filing will divide everything cleanly." Then I heard glasses clink together. They were celebrating. My hand tightened around the documents in my coat pocket. They didn't know about them. Not yet. And all at once I realized they didn't deserve to know. So I turned around and left. I drove to the old diner on Route 9, the same place my mother used to take me whenever life felt overwhelming. I slid into a corner booth, ordered coffee, pulled out the documents, and stared at her signature. She had known. She knew exactly what kind of people I had surrounded myself with, and she trusted me, not them, with everything she owned. That night, I never went home. I checked into a motel under a different name. Then I called an old college friend, an attorney I hadn't spoken to in years. "Are you still practicing property law?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yeah. Why?" I stared at the motel ceiling. "Because I'm ready to disappear." At 6 the next morning, steam rose from my coffee, while legal papers covered the small desk in my room. 2 farms, a coastal mansion, and a will containing one condition I hadn't noticed before. Do not let them take what they never appreciated. Those words were handwritten by my mother. A warning disguised as advice. My phone buzzed continuously. 17 missed calls from my wife. 1 voicemail. "Logan, where are you? You just disappeared. We need to talk. Dad says we can work this out if you stop acting dramatic." I deleted the message. Then I sent a short email to the family accountant, a man who had always respected my mother. Effective immediately. Freeze all remaining shared assets. Legal review pending. Logan Pierce. Attached were copies of the will, property records, and a confidential letter from my attorney. By 8 o'clock, the family group chat exploded. My wife, "What is this?" Her sister, "Logan, seriously?" We had an agreement. Her father, "You think you're going to do this without consequences?" I ignored every message. Instead, I rented a car and headed south toward Palm Beach. I wanted to see the mansion before anyone else did. The gates were old and rusty, but the property behind them looked like something frozen in time. Ivy climbed white columns. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze like silent guards watching over forgotten secrets. I stepped inside. The air carried the scent of citrus, wood, and old memories. According to the caretaker, my mother had once lived there long before I was born. His name was Ramon. He looked old enough to have witnessed every chapter of the property's history. "Your mother used to play piano in that room," he said, pointing toward a bright sunroom filled with faded wallpaper and dusty furniture. I walked through the mansion slowly. Every room revealed another piece of a life I never knew she had lived. Luxury hidden beneath years of silence. Memories carefully protected. In the study, I discovered a safe. Inside were property titles, old photographs, financial records, and a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. Logan. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The moment I recognized her handwriting, I felt my throat tighten. "This belongs to you," she wrote. "Not only because of blood, but because of character. If they come after it, let them. You do not need to argue. You do not need to chase them. You only need to reveal the truth." Reveal. The word seemed to echo inside my head. I sat back in the leather chair and read the letter again. Then again. And finally, I understood. My mother hadn't simply left me property. She had left me a plan. She knew exactly what would happen after she was gone. She knew who my wife really was. She knew what her family wanted, and she had prepared for all of it. Over the next few days, my attorney and I went through every document inside the safe. What we found was shocking. There were financial statements dating back almost 10 years, records of gifts, loans, transfers, mortgage payments, even copies of checks my mother had quietly written whenever my wife and her family found themselves in trouble. Medical bills, business debts, credit card balances, emergency expenses. My mother had helped them repeatedly, yet they never thanked her. Instead, they treated her generosity like an endless bank account. One file stood out from all the others. Inside was a detailed ledger. Every dollar she had ever given them was recorded. Every promise they made in return was documented. And every broken promise was highlighted in red ink. My mother hadn't been naive. She had been collecting evidence. Evidence that told a story very different from the one my wife and her family liked to tell. 3 days later, my wife finally found me. She arrived at the mansion unexpectedly. The security camera alerted me before she even reached the front steps. When I opened the door, she immediately burst into tears. "Logan," she said, "please come home." I looked at her quietly. For years, those tears would have broken me. Now they felt rehearsed. "Why?" I asked. She froze. "What do you mean, why?" I folded my arms. "Why should I come home?" Her expression shifted, only slightly. But enough. "We can fix this," she said. "No," I replied. "You can explain it." Her eyes narrowed. "Explain what?" "The conversation I heard." Silence. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she looked away. "It wasn't what you think." I almost laughed. That's everyone's favorite line when they get caught. She stepped closer. "Logan, my father was angry. My sisters were joking. Nobody meant it." I stared at her. "You laughed." She didn't answer, because she couldn't. Eventually, she lowered her head. I was frustrated. With me? No. Then with what? Again, no answer. The silence told me everything. Finally, she looked back up. "How much did she leave you?" There it was. Not an apology, not regret, not concern. The question she had wanted to ask from the beginning. "How much?" I smiled sadly. And at that exact moment, whatever remained of our marriage disappeared. Because for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not as the woman I married, not as the partner I trusted, but as someone calculating value. Someone measuring relationships in dollars. Someone who never understood what my mother was trying to teach me. I stepped aside and pointed toward the driveway. "You should go." Her face hardened instantly. The tears vanished. The mask fell away. "You're making a mistake," she said. "No," I answered calmly. I finally stopped making one. She left without another word, And as I watched her car disappear beyond the gates, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. The kind that arrives when the truth finally steps into the light. I walked back inside the mansion and sat in the study. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows. My mother's letter rested on the desk. I looked down at her final words once more. You only need to reveal. And for the first time since her funeral, I smiled. Because now I knew exactly what she meant. She had left me with much more than land and buildings. She had left me with the ability to bring this entire game to an end without ever needing to raise my voice. I stayed in the mansion that evening. No arguments, no deception, only silence. The kind of silence that gives your mind space to clear and start fresh. By the next morning, I had made up my mind. At exactly 9:01 a.m., I uploaded a single file to secure cloud storage. It contained a scanned copy of my mother's will, a complete list of assets, and a letter she had written addressed to whom it may concern. In that letter, she described the manipulation, neglect, abuse, and abandonment she had witnessed from my wife's family during the final months of her life. I didn't release it publicly. Not yet. Instead, I sent it to one person only, my wife's corporate compliance officer. 5 minutes later, a response appeared in my inbox. Mr. Pierce, we would like to arrange a formal discussion regarding potential fiduciary misrepresentation. A small smile crossed my face. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was her father. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, her sister called. I ignored that one too. But when my wife finally sent a text message, I opened it. You need to stop this. You're being cruel. I stared at those words on my screen. Cruel. They had pushed my mother aside. They had lied directly to me. They had celebrated while I was grieving. Yet somehow, now that consequences were finally arriving, I was the villain. I typed a single word and pressed send. Reveal. The fallout happened much faster than I had imagined. By noon, the company's board had already organized an emergency meeting. My wife's father wasn't simply a board member, he was the chairman. But with evidence connecting questionable financial transfers and abuse of influence to my mother's estate, his position was no longer just vulnerable. It had become toxic. The compliance officer later forwarded an internal memo to me. Her father had stepped down from his role pending investigation. My wife tried calling again. I let the phone continue ringing. Then came a knock at the front door. When I opened it, she was standing there wearing an expensive designer coat and dark sunglasses, carrying the same carefully practiced panic she always displayed whenever she found herself trapped in a corner. Logan, she started softly. We were upset. We acted stupidly. But we can fix this. You've made your point. I looked carefully at her face, a face I had once imagined growing old beside. Then I opened the folder I was holding and handed her a copy of a legal document. The deed? She asked, confused. To the mansion? She added. No, I answered calmly. To the farms. She blinked. The farms? You can visit if you want, I said. But you'll need approval first. They're being transformed into a grief therapy foundation, a place for people who understand what real loss feels like. For several seconds, she said nothing. She simply stared at the papers as though they were written in a language she couldn't understand. The confidence she had carried to my door began to break apart. Not dramatically. Not with tears. But in that quiet way people fall apart when they realize control is slipping through their hands, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. You're being cold, she finally whispered. This isn't who you are. I met her eyes. No, I said quietly. This is who I am when I stop pretending. She looked beyond me into the mansion, almost as if she were searching for something that still belonged to her. There was nothing. Not the memories, not the photographs, not the land, and certainly not me. I made one mistake, she said. I slowly raised an eyebrow. "You made a habit of it," I replied. The silence settled between us. Heavy, uncomfortable, honest. Then I stepped aside slightly and pointed toward a framed photograph resting on a table behind me. It showed my mother smiling beside a much younger version of me. Both of us were covered in mud from planting crops. A ray of sunlight cut through the image and illuminated her face. I looked at the photo before speaking. She left this place because she knew exactly what people like you would do. My wife remained silent. But she trusted that one day I'd know when it was time to take it back. I took a step forward. "This isn't revenge," I paused. "It's reclamation." She opened her mouth as if she wanted to argue, as if she wanted one final opportunity to rewrite the story. But before she could speak, I gently closed the door. The conversation was over. A few days later, she tried one final time. Not with a phone call, not with a dramatic visit. Just an email. Short. Simple. "We were both wrong. Maybe there's a way forward." I read the message twice. Not because I was tempted. Not because part of me wanted her back. I read it because it reminded me of something. It reminded me of how easily she could twist reality until everyone shared equal blame. How quickly she could turn betrayal into misunderstanding. How effortlessly she could transform accountability into a mutual mistake. But there was no we in what happened. There was no shared responsibility. There was no equal fault. There was only betrayal. There was silence when I needed honesty. There was manipulation when I deserved truth. There was gaslighting when I asked simple questions. There was cold calculation when I offered trust. And there was survival. My survival. I never responded. Instead, I walked across the land my mother had left behind. The warm Florida breeze moved through the palm trees. Workers were already measuring property lines and surveying the grounds. Plans for the therapy retreat were moving forward. A place where people could come to heal. A place where grief would be treated with compassion instead of exploitation. A place built from loss but dedicated to recovery. And maybe, in some way, it would help me heal too. I stopped walking and looked around. The house standing behind me was no longer the same place it had been before. It was no longer a home filled with fake affection and hidden agendas. It was no longer a stage where people performed love while secretly plotting against one another. It belonged to me now. Not just legally, emotionally, spiritually, completely. Every lie had been stripped away. Every illusion had fallen apart. What remained was truth, simple and undeniable. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Then I opened the last photograph I had of my mother. She was standing in her garden, smiling, happy, peaceful. The same smile that had carried me through the darkest days after she was gone. I looked at the picture for a long moment. Then I whispered softly, "I kept my promise." The wind moved gently through the trees. For a moment, everything felt still. Not triumphant, not victorious, just peaceful, just free. The kind of freedom that comes when you finally stop carrying someone else's lies. The kind of freedom that comes when you stop fighting battles that were never yours to begin with. I stood there for several minutes, listening to the rustling palms and feeling the warmth of the sun against my face. There was nothing left to prove. No one left to convince. No one left to chase. No one left to fear. The past would always be part of my story. The betrayal would always be something I remembered, but it would never control me again. I lowered my phone and took a deep breath. Then I turned toward the house and began walking. Each step felt lighter than the one before. There was no audience waiting, no arguments waiting, no lies waiting. Only the sound of my footsteps moving across solid ground. For the first time in years, that was enough. And as I walked forward, leaving the shadows of the past behind me, I realized something my mother had known all along. The greatest victory isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building a life so honest, so peaceful, and so strong that their betrayal no longer has any power over you. And at last, standing on the land she trusted me to protect, I understood exactly what she had meant. I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking toward myself, toward a future built on truth, toward a life that finally belonged to me. And this time, I wasn't looking back.